Welcome to the Heal, Thrive, Dream podcast, where trauma survivors become healthy thrivers. Each month, we'll feature a theme in the trauma recovery and empowerment field. To promote your recovery, healing, and learning how to build dreams, here's your host, Karen Robinson, transformational coach and therapist.
Her safety and the safety of her children. I'm going to read her bio, which is in first person, so these are her words. And then I will proceed with interviewing her. In 1997, Michelle Shakina married who she thought was her fairy tale knight in shining armor. After having successful business and 2 children, I was a stay-at-home mom for many years. In 2014, my life started to unravel. Things escalated quickly, and the next thing I knew, I was being sexually abused by my husband, which turned into him sex trafficking me. I spent many nights crying on the floor of my home, realizing that I was in a very dangerous situation. With fear running through my body and hope in my heart, I ran for the door and got out. Since then, I have spent years in therapy, working in a profession to support myself and strengthen my spirit so I may be the strong mom that my children have needed me to be. I have also become an advocate mentor for other women and have experienced trauma and abuse. Welcome to our show, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
The first thing I'd like to say is just a comment. Mm-hmm. I have worked with women in domestic violence situations, and I have worked with sex trafficking survivors. Mm-hmm. I have never worked with a woman who's been both of those. Like, I can't fathom being married to someone that would sex traffic me, so I can't even wrap my head around this. How do you explain to people the nightmare this was for you?
Well, I guess I'm supposedly in a category now of one for you. How do I explain it? It was really challenging in understanding because it was done very slowly. The perfect stay-at-home mother, if there is such a thing. I was the school PTA president. I was the room mother. I was the advocate for my own 2 children who had their special needs. I was married to someone who I thought was supportive, but when he left for work, which was his own business, I never knew where he went. I thought I did, but I didn't. I didn't know what he was doing, and he would come home, and there would be a meal waiting for him, and he would eat, and then he would go in the room while I cleaned up with the children, and he'd be on his phone or his computer or watching TV. And I did everything I could to keep his attention on me. And when he recognized that, I believe he took advantage and took hold of whatever insecurities that I had and ran with them. So wrapping my head around it is really challenging also, even still, and I've been out for 5 years. But it happens, it can happen. It's actually a lot more common than you realize because, again, being in the community now and helping other women, I have heard stories similar to mine, but it's out there.
Yeah, I'm thinking one of the reasons I'm not exposed a lot to it is because many of the women involved may not have access to services, may not have an insurance or other reasons, financial.
That's definitely part of it. That's why I stayed for so long. One of the many reasons why I stayed. The other part is there's a thought that one would go through and say, is this really happening? Because inside on the left side of, the head is him saying, you want this, isn't this fun, this is keeping our marriage together. And any childhood wound, any insecurity is really exploited, and therefore it keeps somebody locked into that position. I stayed for so long because of the resources. I stayed for so long because I didn't realize that it was going on. I didn't use the word trafficking. I wasn't that word at the time. Thankfully, it's more popular now, which is a really bad way to put it, but it's true. It's more well known. And he presented things to me as, oh, this is just fun. And it might have been for him, but it wasn't for me. So we also protect our spouses. And that's also why a lot of women don't talk about it.
Right. You mentioned that maybe you were a little more vulnerable because of childhood stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Were you also a survivor of childhood abuse?
Well, there wasn't abuse per se, or maybe some people would call it. I was raised in a very strict traditional household. I'm the youngest of a lot of siblings, and I grew up as the quote-unquote ugly duckling and had changed throughout my years. But that whole loneliness, or I'm not good enough, or no one's going to want me, all of that stuff that girls and now boys and teenagers feel really can play itself in a role of who we choose as our companions. And even going forward, when we're in a secure relationship, sometimes that stuff comes up. Nowadays with social media, it's exploded. And I believe that we all walk around with some of those wounds. And even though we get stronger and we move away from them, it's like a rubber band. It could still kind of snap back. So I was, again, to answer your question, I was raised in a strict household where I respected my elders. I respected my father, who was the man of the house, and mother, who was the woman of the house who supported him. Though strong, she did her duties as the traditional wife, as far as making the home, running the household, doing the holiday dinners, all that she did. And that's exactly what I did as well.
I see, yeah. The abuse from your spouse, I'm guessing, was also emotional, the trickery, the manipulation. Did he also hit you or threaten you in any kind of way to keep you in line?
So he didn't hit me, and that was always his argument of, I never abused you, I didn't hit you.
Yeah.
Physical abuse looks different in every situation. There's a saying in the autism world that when you see a child with autism, you see one child with autism. It's the same thing with abuse. When you see an abuse case, it's the same thing. There are similarities that cross over, but physical abuse is not just hitting. Physical abuse could mean grabbing someone in a vulnerable spot and creating some sort of an ailment or an illness. There are parts of me that were replaced, let's say, and he grabbed me and he would hit me in our own bedroom because he liked to have more of a, let's say, rough bedroom, because he was always inebriated for the most part. So as far as keeping me in line, he did it emotionally, and that was enough for me. He would shame me if I didn't partake in whatever narcotics or alcohol that he was using. He would shame me if I said no. No was not an option. It was never an option. He would abandon me. He would walk away from me when we were out and leave me with a stranger and say, will you watch my wife for me? Or give them, $20 and say, I'm going to go here, watch her for me. And I was so naive that I first thought that he was being chivalrous. Until a new friend, an older gentleman who had nothing but love and respect for his wife, said, "What did he say to me?" So these are the kinds of situations that made me stay, that he would use to keep me so that I didn't feel strong or powerful. So that's how he did that.
And it sounds like he used handcuffs that were drugs and alcohol, which is
Absolutely.
what I'm used to hearing from trafficking survivors.
Yeah, I mean, it's a must, because nobody in their right mind would do that. I mean, granted, there are people that are into that. That's fine. Their open marriages or whatever, kinks or situations that they like. And he started with that, although that's not the first thing he started with. And he did it without talking to me. So I really didn't understand what was going on. It was a world that I didn't know before then. I wasn't raised like that at all. I was raised in a religious household, and it was about academics and fundraising and philanthropy. It wasn't about that, and so I wasn't really sure what was happening. And that was his MO. He used to say, "I love putting you in uncomfortable positions and situations," and he did. And it was scary. It was really scary because I couldn't say no.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think of what would be a helpful question for our listeners to this podcast today. And so I'm trying to think how much of your story would be helpful, and I'm not sure about that. I'll let you decide in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm wondering maybe to just, what are some signs that you now see that you didn't see at first that you think could help another woman listening? Like, what are signs that someone that she loves, a partner, a boyfriend, spouse, is planning to traffic her?
What happened to me was I had a traumatic event, and I came home from a funeral. I was out of town. Somebody that I lost that I loved very much in my family. And I said, I really want to live my life to its fullest. And I didn't know who I was telling that to, because he had already had a secret life. If somebody disappears from you for a few hours and you can't get a hold of them, especially now, question it. If they react and they're angry, there's a reason. If they say, "I'm really sorry," or what have you, and it's genuine and you feel it, then perhaps they're telling the truth. Our best indicators are gut instinct. I know we've heard it, but I'm living that. I knew everything was wrong somewhere deep down inside of me, and I covered it up because he was, quote unquote, my husband. He was the father of my children. But I knew what was happening wasn't right, and I didn't know how to get out of it. I didn't know how to stop it. And what happened was, at some point, I gave him my power. I gave him my strength. And that will never happen again. Not in any situation. And, even my siblings, when I finally told them, because nobody knew, he isolated me from the family. And again, it's another indicator.
Yeah.
It's a huge indicator. I had nobody, even my friends. He didn't want to hang out with anyone who wasn't in this realm, in this world, who didn't want to do drugs and didn't want to do all that. He didn't want to be with them anymore. These were my closest friends. And so when this all started to happen, I had no one to. I had no one to talk to. And again, that's another key indicator. That's something to really be aware of. And it all is very gradual. So my best advice to anyone is, number one, to listen to your gut instinct. And number two, watch and listen for cues. I mean, if you have any question in any regard, watch and listen. being the youngest of siblings I was in a really good space. I recognize it more so now, where sitting back and doing less of the action and more of the watching and listening, people will reveal themselves. There's a saying that if you give someone enough rope, they'll hang themselves. Terrible visual to think about, but I don't know where the saying came from, but it's true. It's really true. If you give them this, right, you give them this space to fill in, then they will fill it in with their truth in some form or another.
I think you said something super powerful for any kind of domestic violence, as well as the isolation factor. The perpetrators will, because they can be more successful if they're the only one having exposure to your mind.
Yeah.
Exactly. You have their words only in your head.
Right. And that's what happened.
Yeah.
And then there were different, sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead. I'm going to write down my question.
Okay. So there were different friend groups now at this point that he led me towards. And the ones that I was friends with were in a religious environment or a fundraising environment or, from the school. Those parents, those moms, those friends, he isolated me from also. And what happened was there were now different friend groups, and they were a part of all of this in some form or another because they had their own agenda with me. And that I didn't know. So it was not only his voice in my head, it was some of theirs as well.
Can you give an example of what they would say or do?
Well, he knew everything about me. We were married for 17 years before any of this started. I was married for well over 20 years. So that being said, everything about me he knew, as far as my childhood wounds or my insecurities or things I was working towards or what I've overcome. He would say to people, even when he introduced me, "Oh, you wouldn't recognize her. She was fat when she was a child, or she was fat in high school." And that's that rubber band snapping. But he's the one doing the snapping at me. What would they do? So I had women around me that would befriend me. And I thought, okay, and this is going back to that middle school girl who wasn't accepted or wanted to be friends with the popular kids or what have you, and that we see in every movie and theater show. And now we've got these beautiful that have all been friends for years, and they want to include you, and you're thinking, okay, I was thinking, okay, I'll be your friend, and then they were just as bad as him as far as some of the alcohol and the situations and all of that. But then they would also want me to be a little bit more vulnerable with them and say, well, you're not talking enough about you and your marriage, and we want you to expose a little bit more about yourself so that we know that you really are our friend, and if not, then you can't be a part of us. And that really confused me. But here it was, these were now my only girlfriends that I had. And then what happened was I would do that and they would play on it, and then their boyfriends or husbands were in the background thinking, oh, well, that might be somebody who I might want to be with. And my ex-husband was the ringleader of all of it. And I was like the circus animal. I was the pawn in this whole game. And again, I didn't catch on. I was really naive. And part of that was because of what was running through my system. I couldn't necessarily control my thoughts or even control some of the actions I was taking. And I had no control over it. Because during an event or a party, I wasn't the ones making my cocktails. Or I wasn't the one guiding the event. And it would be going to somebody else's house and doing what was asked of me or told out of respect, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. You mentioned before a couple of times about your husband's secret life.
Mm.
Were you talking about like drug related activity, or did he traffic other women? Like, what can you
Well,
share with us about that?
I'm not 100% sure of everything. I
Mm-hmm.
do know that there were other people. I knew that he was getting massages in hotel rooms, some of which I knew, some of which I didn't. I do know that there was some drug activity. And he told me that he had done that, let's say in college before he met me. I didn't really think anything of it. Again, this was a world I didn't understand because I didn't do any of that. I was a healthcare professional at 22 years old. I was taking care of people my entire life and still am. And again, I've seen some of the Venmo action and, his account and that sort of thing because I had access to that while we were separated, and still married. And I had seen things from way back in the day. I knew that there were places that he tried to take me that I refused in the end. And then I knew that there were places that he had gone to that perhaps fed this other side of him that enjoyed with either gender or any gender, let's say. Um, and that was found out by the places that he frequented.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot that I didn't know. There was a lot that people told me. There was a lot on his work computer that was told to me. So I really had no idea who I was married to. I thought I did. The family photos reveal it. All of it was a lie. What wasn't a lie was my creation of a home, my love for him and his family. Our parents were very close. I had them over every weekend. And even then, we would be in the middle of a brunch and he'd say, I have to go. I have a massage because my back hurts. And, he would leave and I'd be with everybody and taking care of them. And I thought nothing of it because who wants to think anything like that? It didn't. It wasn't
Right.
even in my mind. Like it wasn't in my wheelhouse of thought. My only concern at that point was keeping my family happy and everyone fed and, making sure that my two kids with their issues, academically, emotionally, medically were taken care of and making sure he was happy. So I was running, that treadmill of a daily life.
What was the last straw before you ended this relationship?
Well, it had been 6 years and it wasn't just trafficking. It was just all of it at the point where there were some weekends where if I slept 4 hours, it was a lot because he'd want to be out all night. I realized towards the end that at some point I had to start saying no, which he fought me on, and it was horrible. And I realized I was dealing with an addict and that I had to be the one to get us home and I had to be the one who was sober and I had to be the one to wake up with the kids and take care of them. So I was physically, emotionally exhausted. There were some nights when we would go out and let's say I had a cocktail with dinner, but then I'd wake up on the floor of a bathroom and I didn't know how I got there. Or we'd be out listening to, let's say, some live music and I'd have a drink and then I'd go to the restroom because I didn't feel well and I couldn't hold myself up. And that's not who I am as a person at all. I'm very physically fit. And he would, carry me out or want somebody else to help carry me out. And then we'd get home and he'd take pictures and videos of me all the time. And while I would need help, he'd have me on the floor taking pictures and videos. He would set up scenes like this. The night that I remember finding myself on the floor, I thought I was going to die. I had no phone and I passed out, and he had my son walk in and find me. He was right there. He could have prevented all of that. And I couldn't explain it. So I knew that even though I had previously been in dangerous situations, that if I didn't progress worse, and it did, it started to get worse. I would wake up in somebody else's house and I didn't remember how I got there. And you're talking like 1.5 cocktails. And then when he was inebriated, he would say to me, "Oh, you need to drink, water before you have a second drink, and don't ever sign the check there." He would say this to me when he was intoxicated, which means that I knew that he was setting up situations, and I was definitely not safe. That if I didn't get out, I wouldn't be alive in a week or two. And all I did was see my children's faces, and those are my parents and my family, and I knew I had to save myself. And that's literally where I went, from the floor, where I slept on a mattress in an extra bedroom for a month, a little twin mattress, where I slept on the floor, I cried on the floor, I hid on the floor, to the door. And I ran out and took nothing with me at the time, and I saved myself.
I'm thankful for that.
Thank you.
Would you say that your children suffered trauma from when you were with your husband?
There's no
or
doubt.
were they protected? Okay.
My son, who was older, I believe he was 18 at the time, when it really got bad. He and I would get in the car and we'd search the city where we live for my ex-husband to make sure he didn't drive home from a bar. A couple of times we found him, we put him in the back seat, and he would rant and rave and call my son names. He would see the hole in the wall that my ex-husband would put, and shattered glass. When my ex would come home, he'd be angry and he'd be, hitting a picture frame glass on the wall. Or my ex saying that he'd want to kill himself, and my son and I having to chase him down the street because he would get out of control. And this is a big guy we're talking about, 100 pounds heavier than myself, strong. And
So,
my son saw all of that.
Right. Earlier you said that you weren't physically abused, so I hate to be the one to say this, but when someone is physically threatening, breaking things around you, that is considered physical abuse.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, because it's actually really unsafe. You feel even more threatened. Like if someone hits you, it's done. Yeah. When they don't hit you, but it's getting escalated, it's way more scary.
Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. I never thought of it as physical. And let's see, I'm learning, because I'm still in the realm. Like, did this really happen? Is it considered domestic violence? Well, I had to have a medical procedure done yesterday, diagnostic testing, because I have twice, again, he's ruptured an implant of mine. That's what I was saying earlier. And from being physically abusive to where I had to push him off of me. And again, this is a guy that's 100 pounds heavier than I am. And he's intoxicated all the time. So it's the second time he had done it. And I have, silicone running in my lymph nodes and through my body because of that, which I will address when I'm able to afford it and have the time to take off of work, because as those of us that don scrubs and PPEs, we're all physical. There's no way that we can't have that. So so that's the physical abuse, that to it, including other things, strangulation, to the point of unconsciousness, where there was still sexual assault happening, because I would come to and he'd still be, performing on top of me, or belts around my neck. So it looked very different. It looks very different. It was all mostly in the form of the bedroom. And it's ironic because the people that he trafficked me to, I thought were like, or not. that group, those groups were my family. So I thought, I didn't even know what was going on in the privacy of our own home. And had they known, they would have been really upset, and believe it or not, and never wanted to be around him. Because although they took what he offered, was me, that's a whole different realm of violence that most people do not condone.
Right. So they thought you were a willing participant
Yes.
in their activities. Okay.
Yes.
And they know that he was also violent. Like,
Yes.
he seemed playful to them.
Correct.
This was just...
He was the superstar. He would walk in, and one side of him was full of drugs that he would offer everyone, and the other side was me. So he brought the party. He made sure everyone had a great time. And, this guy's in sales, and he's a spectacular salesman. So what have you got there? He walks into an event, to a party, whether it's 10 people or 30 or more. And we've all seen it in the movies. Hey, how are you doing? And before you know it, he's created an environment that lends itself to doing whatever it is, everyone doing whatever it is that he wants. And the people that we're talking about are powerful, affluent people. Like the Jeffrey Epstein story.
Wow.
I don't look like the average person that you would see on the trafficking signs. As my sister say, I'm too smart, as everybody would tell me. So, for one.
Abuse, sex abuse, any kind of abuse, it doesn't matter how smart we are or how educated. No. Can happen to any of us.
It can. And that's the scary part. And, so now I do work with people that have gone through this. I try and get to people before this actually happened, or any sort of abuse. And I work also with the LGBTQ community, because it's very rampant in that community also. And with men as well, it can happen. And I think that it doesn't matter your age, your socioeconomic level, your gender identity. It doesn't matter. We're all human beings, and we all deserve that respect and the help, because there is help out there.
You telling us a little bit about your healing journey, like what things were the most effective in your healing journey? It can be anything. Like, we all heal kind of differently.
Absolutely. So the first thing was going to a safe space, environment for myself, whether it be physical and emotional. Even to this day, even yesterday, I thought to myself, I was feeling anxious because I was getting this procedure, and I drove by a police station. I thought, I just need to sit in there. I just need to sit there in the reception room, the waiting room, and just feel safe. So then I worked through that in my own head. I do a lot of writing, and what I did was, instead of that, I sat outside and I wrote. And I think that putting pen to paper, not even on our phones, although that's fine too, pen to paper, especially if you've had any physical abuse, it gives you the power. It makes you feel like you're powerful. And almost like when they were writing the Constitution, you saw them. I'm a big Hamilton fan. There's something about it. It's a physiological change, and I have no power, I have no voice, I have no right to talk about anything, to having that energy change completely into, again, taking your pen or pencil and putting it to paper. So that was number one, as well as finding a safe spot. Healing is, I'm in therapy and have been in therapy with a nonprofit organization. Women in Distress was the first one I went to. And they're a phenomenal organization. And there are different nonprofits that I've worked with in universities, part of their trauma program. And talk therapy has worked for me. I started doing EMDR, which is fantastic. If you know the science of it, I recommend looking that up. Unfortunately, I was doing that online, and that it doesn't work as well as in person. I've done some of the Eastern medicine. I've done Reiki, and meditation is very big. And meditation could be, like I had said to you earlier, I was listening to your podcast. I might lie down in my bed or sit quietly somewhere and listen to a podcast. And what that does for me is, with all of the gaslight that has happened, I can constantly hear somebody else's words in my head. And the way to push that out is affirmations, writing, also getting new information. Podcasts are beautiful because not only do you feel like you're not alone in this world, because some of us can get that way, even if we're amongst our families and we're a mother and we're running a household and we're doing all that, there's a little bit of loneliness sometimes. And getting other information can clear out that gaslight. Because if she can do it, I can do it too. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
So as we wrap up in time, I know you have a website and a way for people to reach you. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah. I created a website this summer. I took some time off because I realized that what so many of us do is we run. We run and we do, and we keep ourselves busy, and we try and be productive because to us that means success, or that we're healing, or we're going to be okay. Sometimes also that lends itself to being exhausted and emotional and anxious. And I recognize that. So I took some months off, and I decided to face everything and do what I love to do, and that's to help everyone and be creative. So I created a website. It's called FromTheFloorToTheDoor.com. And there's a page there that you can contact me any time of the day, any day of the week. And I would reach out to you because I know what it's like at that 3, 4 a.m. time when you wake up or you have a nightmare. I also have a lot of resources that I like to offer to people. And in that also I have posts that I've written, blog posts of my writing. I have quite a few, actually, 2 posts still, but there are some pieces there that I hope are very helpful. I believe are helpful. I've heard that just come from my heart and that speak to me at that moment. And I would love for anyone to take a look at it and reach out to me. Even if you've gone through the healing, let's connect. Because if we're talking about women, we're a sisterhood. We need each other. I truly believe that. So it's FromTheFloorToTheDoor.com, and it's the title of my first book. I'm working on 2 at the moment.
Okay, so neither are published, available at this point?
Not yet.
Okay.
They're works in progress, because while I'm writing, I'm also been living and surviving, because I'm still, to this moment, on this day, there is still abuse happening. It's not physical, but there's emotional and financial abuse, and there's abuse happening with my children, also emotionally and financially, that I have to address. So it's a constant battle for me still. So time management is a bit challenging, but I'm always putting pen to paper, like I said, and one day it'll be out there. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for survivors, I also suggest this too for anyone with any kind of emotional or physical pain, like, chronic pain. Sometimes it's not time management that works for us. It's energy management, because we only have so much of it.
Only so much. And right. And I learned that the hard way. Like I said, running and running and running and doing and helping and healing other people is my life's mission. Taking care of myself.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm at now. Physically.
I suspect many listeners will be in the same kind of boat.
Yes.
I feel like they go together.
Absolutely.
And it's a God thing, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. And those of us that are running households and or healthcare workers, those two categories, when that crosses over, we're even more so to neglect ourselves and be like, I could handle it. If I could do that, I could do this. If she could do that, I could do this. And so now it's again, it's still the 24/7. And having gone through that my entire adult life, and in that abusive state, if I was able to do that, then this is nothing. But that's incorrect. It's incorrect. Just because you're a quote unquote survivor doesn't mean that you can't grant yourself time and that space to do so, to heal, and to have the energy to take care of yourself.
If you'd like to read, there's a beautiful book that I found helpful. It's called The Full Engagement, and it talks about how to manage your energy, or not manage your energy, but more so using your energy, the ups and downs of it, to get things done that are important to you. Okay. Also, when your books come out, please share them with me so I can add them to your show notes anytime in the future. So whenever people happen upon this podcast, they're like, oh, I want to get her book. I really want to.
Thank you.
Her stories really resonates with me.
Well, the pieces that I put online are actually going to be a book. So there's a little bit of a glimpse there.
Awesome. Well, Michelle, I am feeling very fortunate that you've spent this time with us.
Thank you.
I think it's a very empowering session or episode, knowing that there is hope, knowing that there are ways out. And also, like, you didn't sugarcoat anything. You never said, oh, this will be easy for you.
No.
Because no one's going to believe you if you say it.
It's not easy. It's not easy. I mean, I woke up this morning and I had to remind myself, you're okay. You are safe. You are not alone. It's not easy at all. It really isn't. None of it is. And that's why we need each other. Because I could have gone down that dark path and been in bed and whatever it is that we all do to retreat. But I made a conscious decision to not. And here we are.
Yeah, we're grateful. So thank you for being on our show today.
Anytime. Thank you.
The recording has stopped.
Okay, how did you feel it went?
It was good. How did you feel it went?
I hate that you had to go through all that, but I think our episode will help people.
Yeah, I hope so. I really do. And I don't always like to talk about the trafficking because it was so much more than that. It really is. And I see and hear and read there's so much more of this gaslighting and people lying to other people out there. And then the misuse of all of that, all of those words. And I like to educate and remind people to listen to their instinct because we think we all know what that means, but we really don't.
Yep.
And thank you. I'm definitely going to look into that book because I love to read. I absolutely love to read.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. It really is. And I love to also do Audible because, if I am doing something in the home, I do like to have something in my ears and or in my head to get rid of, let's say, some thoughts that I may or may not be having. So
since you mentioned audio, there's a wonderful book to listen to, and you may have already listened to it. It's called Self-Compassion.
I haven't heard that one.
It's so soothing for your ears. I've recommended it probably to thousands of clients at this point, and they actually gift it to everybody in their life. It's really powerful.
Okay.
It's Self-Compassion, and the author is Dr. Kristen Neff, Neff.
Okay.
I'm actually doing a trauma and grief group in my church coming up mid-September for 8 weeks, and we're going to use that book.
Wow. I'll definitely look into that.
If you love audio, you're going to really love hearing her voice.
I'd love to.
It's very soothing.
Okay, that's incredible. That would be perfect then at nighttime because I like to bring it down. During the day, I'll listen to very uplifting or preachers or that sort of thing. And then it's funny, for each emotion that I have that I'm either going through or want to lean towards, I have a certain person to listen to. But at nighttime, I do bring it down. So I do more meditations. There's a lot of them with prayers that I love to listen to. So that would be great. I'll look into this today, actually.
Awesome.
Right now. Thank you.
And if you have favorite books that helped you in your healing journey, feel free to email them to me and I'll add them to the show notes. I meant to ask you during the podcast.
Okay.
I usually have. What I do is I add them to the show notes. Like, these are Michelle's favorite books that she thinks will help your healing. Or it doesn't have to be all healing. Like, it could just be books you've enjoyed.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Or empowering.
Yeah. I have to go here in a sec because I have a 12 o'clock, but I wanted to say too, I offer to do reviews for women who write about trauma. So that would mean you sending me a copy of the book. Like, I had to stop paying for the books because I have a kid in college.
Yeah.
I
here now.
I still spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on books way too frequently. My husband's going to kill me.
Right.
I shouldn't joke about that. That's not cool.
No, right. That's okay. I understand. It's okay.
He gets upset with all my spending on books.
I'm sure. It's okay.
Yeah, so if that's something that interests you, I
that's wonderful. That's a great
Amazon reviews. Yeah.
That's brilliant for you also. I love that idea.
Yeah. And then I can add to the show notes, like, I can endorse this book. It's something that was really helpful. Yeah.
Wow.
All right. Well, it was a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you. Same here.
When I work on this summit this month, I will add you as a possible speaker. Okay. And of course, you can always tell me no.
Okay.
Think about like, if you were a professional or a survivor in the audience, what would be helpful to present about, or what do you think your secret sauce is? Yeah. Okay. Think about that and just email me if you come up with some cool ideas.
Okay. Definitely. I will do. All right. So the summit would be for survivors and professionals?
My experience is they're often the same, believe it or not.
That's funny because I'm thinking about going back because my youngest just went to college. So I'm thinking about going back to school myself now to get into mental health. Right now I'm in physical health, but I do so much of mental health, with my patients that I really want to get into it. And especially now it's my passion here, obviously.
Yeah. My experience is there's a lot of overlap, not 100%, but a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
So I think I would keep those two audiences in mind.
Yeah. Okay. I will do that. Thank you. The same here.
Thank you for listening in today. Please join us next week, same day and time. Also, I would love for you to check out my website, healthrivedream.com.